Good morning, friends. Anne here. Got my cup of coffee, got the Word of God, and today's reading is from Galatians chapter 5, verses 13 all the way down to 26, but I'm going to focus on just a couple of verses that really grabbed my attention today. So let's go ahead and read 14 and 15 of Galatians chapter 5. It says this: "For the whole law can be summed up in this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. But if you are always biting and devouring one another, watch out. Beware of destroying one another." Friends, Paul is telling the church at Galatia that all of the laws that they are worried about following, all of the little minutia that they are pointing back to and accusing each other of and condemning each other of breaking, that all of that can simply be summed up in this one commandment: to love your neighbor as yourself. What does that mean? Well, think about how you want to be loved. This word love is agape here, which doesn't mean the kind of love that just tolerates. It means the kind of love that goes the distance, that goes beyond. And just so you know that this is not something that Paul just mentions in this one place, let me read to you Romans chapter 13, verses 8 and 10. It says this: "Owe nothing to anyone except for your obligation to love one another. If you love your neighbor, you will fulfill the requirements of God's law. For the commandments say, you must not commit adultery, you must not murder, you must not steal, you must not covet. These and other such commandments are summed up in this one commandment: love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to others, so love fulfills the requirements of God's love." And just so you know that this is not just something that Paul said, but this is something that Jesus himself said in each of these three gospels. Let's start with Matthew. Matthew 22, verses 37 through 40 says this: "Jesus replied, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important: love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and the demands of all the prophets are based on these two commandments." He says it again in Mark chapter 12 and Luke chapter 10. Friends, this is repeated over and over and over again because it is so important to our faith. I think there are so many of us that assume that we are called to hold people accountable for all of the things in the Old Testament, all those little tiny laws, and we focus on the judgment and the condemnation. And what Jesus says here is if we focus on the love, all the rest of that will come together, because love is at the heart of the law. The law is not about judgment and condemnation. It is showing us that the love of Jesus is so important that we recognize by the fact that we cannot keep the law, that we need the love of Jesus to make us right. Friends, the law is all about love. And if we look back at Galatians 5, where we started, love your neighbor as yourself. But if you are always biting and devouring one another, watch out. Beware of destroying one another. Friends, you and I often destroy each other because we are so concerned about all the little bitty bits of the law and who's doing what and how we can judge and condemn. And we will end up destroying ourselves. The cure for the world's disunity is love. It's loving our neighbor as we want to be loved ourselves. So friends, if you want to live in a different world, then make it a different world. Love your neighbor, because that fulfills the law. Have a good day.